Welcome to the Landscaping Podcast. My name is Joel Barnett and I'm your host. And today's episode, I'm talking with Darin Bradbury from Mint Pool and Landscape Design. Darin's got a great story about how he started in the industry. He's kind of got a great template of what to do before he start as a landscape designer, because he had a varied start to his career. So he started in working at a vineyard and had a very horticulturally and maintenance-based beginning. And then he studied at Burnley as well. So I've mentioned that a few times about, seems like all the great designers studied at Burnley. And then he was working for Ian Barker Gardens as their senior designer there, and then went out on his own thing, working with Scott Wynd from TLC Pools. So he's studied a bit of construction as well. Not as much as he would have liked to, as he says, but yeah, it's just a very well-rounded knowledge base of the entire landscape industry before moving into design. So I loved how he did all that. Right at the start, he talks about how people look down on maintenance a little bit. So it was good to put my point across as well about how important maintenance is, being the most underrated thing within a landscape design. One of the questions that's come through from the Instagram Q&As that we've been doing was, how do you work out how to charge for a landscape design? Like, how do you know what you should be charging? So I asked him that question. So he gives a pretty good answer. And he's also been involved in a lot of things. Like I say that they're things that don't make you money. So he's done he's done a garden on the block. He's done Melbourne International Flowering Garden Show, and he's doing that again this year. He just did a TV show with Shayna Blaze, where he designed her garden on there for the TV show. And he's done the Pool and Spa show and the HVA home show. So he's done a lot of things that are, not normal designs but all point towards marketing. And he mentions which one of them work and which ones don't. And yeah, it was fascinating to hear how well one of them works particularly. So yeah, it's a great episode for designers to listen to, especially this one, because he's got some great knowledge about the industry, about how things are done and how things should be done. So I love the episode. So hopefully you enjoy this episode as much as I did with Darin Bradbury. Darin, thank you very much for joining us on the Landscaping Podcast. My first question for you is, how did you start in the industry?
Good question. Look, I don't know if I came through. I guess I probably came through an indirect route initially. Like in my early 20s, I was in the wine industry, so I was studying to be a winemaker. I was doing enology at uni and working out in the Yarra Valley at De Bordeley's in the cellar there, making wine, and also in the vineyard. So I had a diploma in viticulture and was halfway through a winemaking degree when I decided to switch out of that for multiple reasons, actually. But one of them was just that they didn't have good opportunities for young people in that industry, I thought. The other was I wanted to be closer to the buzz of the city. I didn't like being out in the middle of nowhere. So, but part of what I was studying, I loved the chemistry side of things, and I loved the plant side of things, because we did a lot of biology and things like that, and I loved that stuff. So I knew I wanted to do something with plants, and I did like the outdoors type thing. And Jamie Deary was big at the time. Not that I wanted to be Jamie, but I did like the idea of designing gardens. That was just my thing. Well, not a great plan, but I was young and stupid. So I went and studied. I decided to switch to horticulture, and I could take some of those subjects that I passed already and apply them and get some credit, I guess, from horticulture. So I did my advanced diploma of horticulture through Burnley, and then I articulated into the degree of horticulture and finished that as well. So all the time that I was working through doing horticulture, I was doing that part-time and trying to get as much experience in as many places as I could. So I did garden maintenance for 2 years part-time, and people sometimes, they look down a bit on garden maintenance, I think, but I think that's ridiculous, because I think that the time I spent in doing garden maintenance for those 2 years, even part-time, was just probably the most valuable asset I've got in terms of experience. I mean, seeing just 2 life cycles of a garden and being involved in helping things grow and seeing what grows where has been an invaluable asset for horticulture. For even now, I use it. I think back to that time and I can recall stuff that worked well and how to deal with that. And even now, when clients ask me about how to take care of plants, I've got that knowledge to draw on as well. So yeah, a bit of landscape garden maintenance. And I did a little bit of landscape construction in that time as well. I worked in a retail nursery, which again was another invaluable asset. People would come in all day, every day, say, what's this problem on my plant? I'd have to diagnose it. People would ask me what plant goes where. I'd have to tell them. So a lot of that stuff, it just really was a great basis. Like, I think I probably did the right. The one thing I regret is probably not getting more landscape construction experience, actual hands-on stuff. But as I studied, I focused on landscape construction and landscape design at Burnley, and I chose electives that would put me into that sort of side of things. So I probably didn't do the normal stuff. I actually chose to do like a 6-month AutoCAD course. I did the landscape construction stream in the advanced diploma and in the degree. So I studied under, I've forgotten his name now, but he was excellent. He'd been in the industry for years, and every word that he spoke, I hung off every word because he just had so much knowledge.
Nick Van Diemen?
No, it wasn't Nick. Oh God, I can't believe I've forgotten his name. No, he'd been there for like 20 years or something. Anyway, if it comes to me, I'll say it. But yeah, he was amazing, and so I got a lot of theoretical experience on the landscape construction side, but I would have loved to have get some more hands-on stuff. But and straight out of uni, I went and worked for they were kind of almost like a commercial landscape company. They did a bit of residential. They were called Solid Rock Landscaping out in Moorabbin, and they didn't have a design department. And I said, "Oh yeah, we can do design." So they set me up with design there. So I ended up first year out of uni running a landscape design business for this company, which was again just thrown in the deep end. And it was okay, but again, amazing learning experience. But I think I had heart palpitations every time I went and met with a client for that first year, because either I wasn't sure what I was talking about, or wasn't sure how to deal with clients and things at that stage. So I did that for a year, and I went and worked for Ian Barker and Associates for about 18 months as well. Was design manager for those guys. Then moved to TLC Pools, and Scott Wynd, who runs TLC Pools, we started TLC Design off that business, and I managed that for about 5 years. And now I own my own business running Mint Design. I've done that for now 4 years. So that was a very long-winded explanation of where I've come from, but that's the trajectory.
Yeah, it sounds like the perfect blend of experience to going through. Like, the amount of great people who have been to Burnley, and the fact that you were doing little bits and pieces of everything, so you get a full rounded knowledge. So and you having the plant knowledge to start with as well.
But people skip that a lot, I think. And like I said, it's been great to have that knowledge now, and it's stuck in my head. If there's one thing that that's stuck in my head more than anything else, it's bloody plants. I'm terrible at maths. Like, I can't do maths to save myself. Can't remember numbers, but you point a plant out and I can name it. I just loved learning plants. Maybe it was the rote learning side of stuff, but plants and how to take care of plants and all that sort of stuff was really good. And it, like I said, I think it gets left out a little bit, but it's something I think every designer could do with.
Yeah. And talking about when you said people talk down maintenance, I always say that maintenance and garden lighting are the two most underrated things in a landscaping project.
Yeah,
and if I had to pick one over the other, it would definitely be maintenance, because it makes just an amazing amount of difference to a well-maintained garden.
Oh, it does. It does. And a healthy growing garden is always better. It doesn't matter what the plants are, to be honest with you. If the plants are growing and they're happy and healthy, a garden will look amazing, and it'll be a great space to be in, right? Like you sit amongst lush greenery and it feels good, but if you've got a patchy garden where things have died, it doesn't feel as nice. So I always say to clients, successful plants are better than dead plants, of course, but it's all about and keeping them looking good. And you do need a good gardener is hard to find. I think you don't need some guy who just mows your lawn. Someone who understands plants and can take a garden and build it, because gardens, and a lot of our clients probably I think this when we design it, it gets built. That's the garden, right? But that's not the way it is. A garden is a living, breathing thing. It takes time. It develops over time. Some things might work, some things might not work, and things need to be updated and changed and that sort of thing. So it evolves, right? And I think you need someone there sort of shepherding it through that evolution, and someone who knows what they're doing so they can fill in gaps or add to it and give it a bit of personality as well from the client. That's always quite nice. So my expectation is that we set the idea of the garden, and it's always good to have someone who can, like I say, shepherd that garden through at least the first 3 or 5 years to see it come to life. And from again, a business owner's perspective, from the design side of things, photos are really critical to what we do, and marketing and things. And, if you've got someone who's had a garden that's been well maintained by a professional outfit, the photos after 3 or 5 years are going to be 1,000 times better than the photos you take when you first had that built, where if it's not taken care of, you're always a bit nervous of turning up and seeing what you're going to be photographing. It can be a bit ordinary. Yeah. And you have to frame your shots so that you haven't got the garden in there or something. But yeah, a well taken care of garden, a maintained garden is a beautiful thing.
Yeah. And you mentioned you worked for Ian Barker before. When I had him on, he was talking about one of the benefits of having his own maintenance team is that exact thing. He gets to go back to the gardens and photograph them and then use them as marketing.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And if I could, I would get all my clients to do garden maintenance. I'm probably not quite in that sphere where clients will get all my clients will get garden maintenance done. There's probably a small percentage of them that will. Whereas I think, and that's, I think partially because we're sort of based in the west of Melbourne, rather than say the inner east, where people really value that and really do it a lot. But like I said, a certain percentage of our clients do it, and they are always the best gardens. Always the best over time. You've got to stay on top of it. You've got to have someone doing it regularly.
Yeah. So have you ever thought of having like a design or construction side of the business, or is it just always going to be 100% maintenance? Design?
Always design. I always sort of tinker with the idea of doing maintenance, just because that's a bit of my background and I always loved it. And I think, like I say, there's a natural connection between design and maintenance, far more natural than say design and construction. It's a very construction, I think you've got to have a good experience, lots of experience to do construction, and it's a big thing to operate, and there's lots of challenges and it's callbacks and all that sort of stuff. And I don't have enough bandwidth in my head just to run design business. So doing construction would be a whole new ball game for me, and probably not something that I'd want to take on because I get a heart attack after a couple of years. But maintenance, I'd feel a lot more confidence with, just because I've done it before and I got my head around how that works and how that would work. But again, it's a whole other business, right? And then look 5 years ago, this is a bit of an industry trend. Is we had a lot more businesses doing design, construction, pools, maybe even maintenance all together. And now, as the industry's got more busy, there's a lot more clients out there. People are specializing more, right? So now we just do design, or just do construction, or and I think that's probably a better model. And it might be okay to do a little bit of both, or 2 things, or something like that. And you've got guys like Ian Barker who do 3 things really well. It is a good model, I think, to specialize and focus on one thing, especially at first. Get that set up, get that working, and then I'd probably, if I get my design business humming and working the way I'd like to, and I can step away a little bit, I might have a bit more time to set something like that up. But starting a new business is always a challenge, and I'd hate to take my time away from my preferred business before I start something else.
Yeah. And I reckon there's a lot of landscape construction folks who have tried to do a bit of maintenance as well for that exact reason. Like I certainly did it probably 7 years ago when I started back in to phase 2 of the business. But you can't have the same people doing maintenance as doing construction. So
no, you cannot.
That's the problem.
No, you can't. And look, it is. And look, I can't say it's about every contract. I mean, look, often guys go into building gardens not because they love plants. It's because they love construction, right? And they're good at that. They're good tradesmen, and they could lay a beautiful set of paving. They can line up all the grout lines. But when it comes to plants, it does take almost a different type of person. I think someone who loves plants and has a better touch with the organic stuff. And so I think you, not always, but you generally find that they're quite different people who fit those molds. So it was interesting. I was speaking to again, my names are terrible. It's from Semken Landscaping.
He was on last week, actually.
Was he? What was his name?
It hasn't been released yet. Marty Semken.
Okay. Yes, Marty. It was Marty. Yeah, sorry. It was Marty in a meeting. I'll never forget what he said. He said that I don't know if he said this to you last week, but He talked about the guys he brings into construction. He now puts them through a Parks and Gardens. What's it called?
Apprenticeship.
Apprenticeship.
Yeah.
Apprenticeship, rather than whatever it is, the construction apprenticeship. And that's because people who want to do that are generally more attached to plants and care about the organic side of things, which is what we need on the ground as well, not just those guys who are into the hardcore construction, guys who care about plants and are thinking about how that soil is prepared for the plants, because often I think that gets, I was out at site the other day. I don't know why. It's the first time I've done this in years, but I happened to just be planting a plant for a client. And I was trying to get this shovel. I went in about like an inch and I hit concrete. And it wasn't a concrete slab, but it was, all this dried concrete where someone had poured all their stuff out into this garden bed. And there was this big patch in his garden where things wasn't growing. And I had to say, look, it's mainly because everything under this soil, this top layer of soil is just a hard pan sort of cement mix. And it needs to be broken up, because you could see this is literally a 2-meter diameter patch of garden just was struggling. Everything else was beautiful and lush. And you could see why once you started digging. But, I think if you've got guys who are thinking about plants when they're initially planting them, you might get less of that, where the soil is prepared properly, or they break up that stuff or take a lot of that, concrete waste out before things go in. They might actually think about incorporating the garden blend soil into the top 100, 150 mil of existing soil just to break it up. They might put down gypsum or something to break up the clay. Just smarter stuff that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to look better when it's finished, but it means it's going to be a more successful garden. So if you've got guys like that on site, that'd be amazing.
Yeah. That question that I asked Marty, that exact same question that he spoke to you about the apprenticeship, because I'd heard that as well. Yeah. So I was wanting to hear if that's what he did. And
that's so interesting.
Such a great idea, because he basically said he can teach him the landscape construction side of things.
Yep.
But it's so much more involvement in the soil profile and plant biology.
Yeah, isn't it? It's just such an interesting thing to hear. I think that's a really interesting lesson, and he's been around for a long time, Marty. So I think if that works for him and his business, I think that's a really good takeaway for anyone else doing construction. And great to hear from a design perspective, because plants are pretty critical to what we do.
Yeah, and like I said to him when I did my apprenticeship, it was horticulturally based, more so than construction now. And my guys do landscape construction at TAFE, and they haven't taught me a thing that I haven't learned on site. So I could have taught them everything that they've learnt, whereas their plant knowledge is not going to be quite as good. Because like you did before you started, I studied horticulture and worked at a nursery before I started landscaping.
Yeah,
so
good.
My plant knowledge is more than the average bear. Landscape builders. So
there's nothing like being put under the pump to remember plant names or get asked 1,000 questions from people walking into the nursery to get something stuck into your head. It's brilliant. But, I think just you touched on there, what you get taught these days. And I think it was Marty when I met him, we were talking about something with Landscape Victoria about what we're learning or what people coming through the industry are learning. And I think we lost Burnley, or at least we lost that degree, and that's such a big hole in the market, for what we do. That was just the breeding ground for a lot of designers, and that's gone. Well, in that form, Burnley's still there, but the degree is different now, and it just that hole hasn't been filled. And I feel like the industry that everywhere where we're bringing these guys through, it's not teaching them now what we need them to know either. It hasn't progressed, and landscape design has just boomed, over the last 5 or 10 years. And what we do now is completely different to what we did 15, 20 years ago. The level of detail, what we're designing. And it might have been, 10 or 20 years ago, we were employed to do a garden. We were designing plants. That's what we did. Now, most of what I do, and I know there's other guys who probably go the other way still with plants and things, but we do a lot of hardscape construction design now. It's pergolas and alfresco roof areas and paving and concrete and all sorts of different stuff. Plants are just a small part of it now, and I think some of our educational industry hasn't moved with that, and probably isn't teaching them quite what we need people to know. So hiring people at the moment, there's a little bit of a shortage on experienced staff or staff knowing what we need them to know to do what we need them to do.
Yeah. Have you seen the London College of Garden Design that
I have. Yeah,
I
I
reckon
have.
that looks like the perfect. If I was going to recommend to someone to do design, that's where I'd be sending him, because that seems like it's like what you did to start.
Yeah, it's got does teach them some interesting stuff. I still think these courses are too short. I think we need a 3-year course and a degree, and because if you think of how much people need to know and how much time they've actually got, say, doing a diploma or like a 2-year thing or even a certificate, it's just not enough time, because they need to get on things like AutoCAD, for instance, or even SketchUp, digital stuff that we need them to know that they don't teach them, or they might only cover for 4 weeks, and that's just not enough. You need a good 3-year course to sort of get stuck into that. And you can never expect them to know everything when they come out of uni. No one ever does, but they just need that good 6-month subject to get their head into it. So when they come out, they've got a decent grounding, and then we can grow it from there. But you're right. The London College Garden Design course looks like it's got some pretty interesting stuff.
Yeah, because like when I looked into landscape architecture early days, and the course, it was basically like a lot of people who had done it. It's about what's the word? Town planning, basically, sort of doing big commercial stuff that's completely irrelevant to the high end landscape design or residential landscape design. So
that's right. Landscape design doesn't have a really formal qualification anymore, which is a shame. Landscape architecture does. And personally, I think the way the industry is going with the regulations that are now being applied to our industry, and there's a lot more red tape. And if you don't know about planning permits and planning overlays or building permits, if you don't know about that stuff and you don't know how to draw a construction drawing, you're gonna be falling behind. And there needs to be something that teaches that. And there's nothing. We need something like landscape architecture, but for the residential market. But that's just me wanting. I don't know. I don't think that'll ever happen. It would be amazing.
I don't know. It's weird. Like, why a lot of things don't change. Like what people are being taught at school doesn't change as much as what it should. Like I loved maths. It was my favorite subject, and I was just sort of naturally good at it. So I'd get the answer, but I couldn't explain how I worked it out. It was just, I just knew answers to a lot of things. And then teachers are saying, you're not going to have a calculator in your pocket all the time, so you need to know how to work it out. And then it turns out we do have a calculator in our pocket all the time. So, but you still, at school, you still have to show how you work things out.
Yeah.
That's not changing. And I reckon hopefully that does, and the landscape architecture courses do as well.
Yeah, there's always this lag, I think, with what industry needs and what the education industry delivers. And there's always going to be a time where we're screaming out for things before things might actually even happen. So, but I think it's the same with the apprenticeship, the construction apprenticeship, and same as design. We all need probably a better course or better grounding to move up through. So we've got more experience when we get to the end of it, and people are more employable then as well. But the education industry isn't necessarily about making people more employable necessarily either. It's about sometimes I think the university stuff is more about churning out academics, but what we need people with good practical skills that can come in and hit the ground running.
Yeah. Yeah. So how many employees do you have at the moment?
Good question. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 or 7 thereabouts. Right. Yeah. So we've got quite a few. And I mean, as a lot of businesses in our industry would have found, the last couple of years have just been insanely busy. So we've put on staff through that time. And look, it from our side of things, it's probably been, part of it is just the industry is really busy. And there's a lot of work out there. If you're quiet at the moment, something's wrong, because there's a ton of work out there. But I think the other part is we've marketed ourselves pretty well. As a design business, we were not the first to use 3Ds and renders, but we certainly made it a big part of our business deliberately. So that's something that we've focused on over those last couple of years. And I think that's probably paid dividends now, not in terms of increasing the amount of work, but certainly increasing the quality of the work, which is really critical from our aspect. I mean, I'd love to be doing probably less projects, but better quality projects, just so we've got more time to focus on those, get the design right, rather than probably spreading ourselves a little bit thin on multiple projects. But we've increased the number of people, and we're looking to put on a new senior designer. But I think if you talk to any landscape design business at the moment, they'll say that. So it's a competitive market for experienced designers at the moment. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah. And when you started the design side of things, how did you go? Because I had someone ask me this question the other day, a designer trying to work out how much they should charge for design. So how did you go about working that out to start with?
Oh, badly. No, I always say no one's ever accused me of being a good business person, and there's a good reason for that. Like trial and error. Like you always undervalue yourself when you first start, and in a way, you kind of got to, because you got to get your foot in the door somewhere and get projects in. So you always undervalue yourself, but you got to, I guess, we've quickly learned again over the last couple of years our true value in the industry, and we've put our prices up probably accordingly. We could probably go up a little bit higher, but how do you work it out? Well, you've got to make yourself competitive, like I said, just to get projects in the door, because that's when you first start out, you've got to get experience. Nothing beats experience. And there's guys out there now who do beautiful modeling and beautiful renders and things, but you still hear the stories that their budgets were so over the top that they got canned because the clients couldn't afford it. So you can be a great designer, but if you don't have the experience to understand what you need to do with budget or with, challenging sites or planning or building permits and all this sort of stuff, you're going to shoot yourself in the foot. So you've just got to get experience and get that up, and then just increase your prices as you can and keep pushing it. It's always scary when you're first putting prices up, because you go, I'm going to lose work. And doesn't matter if it's design or anything else. You're probably going to, as a business owner, you're going to go, I'm going to put my prices up. Oh God, what if no one signs up? And maybe that'll happen, but in our industry over the last 5 years, it's kind of just been on an upward trajectory, so it hasn't been a problem. I guess at some point it's going to taper off, and it's going to get a bit quieter, and maybe there'll be a little bit of a correction. But yeah, like I said, I would just get as many projects through the door as you can, work hard, and then put your prices up slowly. And as you get more experience, as you build your portfolio, as you get more traction in the market, you've just got to put your prices up like that. And there's no one answer. You just got to work it out as you go.
Yeah. And I was talking to someone else about it today. And there's no rule that once you put your prices up, they have to stay there. You can always bring it back down if you're not getting any work.
Absolutely.
And when Diane just moving into more designs at the moment, when I was charging half of what I charge now previously, and which was it was like, so I was charging $1,700 for a design, and I wasn't doing good designs because the people who pay that don't have a big budget for their landscape. So then I doubled the price, and the projects have got a healthier budget, so I can do a better design.
Yep.
So they're paying more and also getting a better result. So you've also got to, you can sort of cut yourself short by not charging enough to get a good budget.
You've got to reach the right people, and I guess the logical extension to that is when you have that first conversation with people, the budget conversation, is that setting the right expectation for those clients, and you always get to this point where people say, how much do you think it's going to cost? It's the dreaded question. And you're quickly trying to work things out in your head. And with design, it can be, if you've got a really complex project, it's a really tough question. But setting the expectation correct from the beginning is really critical. And that, again, it might knock people off to get a really big figure thrown at them, but it will keep the right people, right? So if you tell them what you really think it's going to cost, you're always going to look like an idiot at the moment because the prices are going through the roof no matter what. But generally speaking, you give them a price, and if they think it's too high, you don't get the job. No harm done. But if people go, okay, that's great. We can, that's about how much we thought it was, or that's more than we expected. But maybe now that you've talked to us, we can see the value in doing that. So it's almost like you're filtering those clients. If you want higher end clients, or clients are prepared to spend more, setting that expectation early and hitting them with the what you think it might be, what you think it really might be, rather than what you think they want to hear, is really important. Setting expectations with clients is probably the key to that first consultation. And like you say, just getting the clients you want just by giving them the right information. And you need a bit of experience to do that, but it's again, invaluable experience. It's better for your business to be able to do that.
Yeah. I had a client that was doing a design for it. They wanted to had a fiberglass pool going in. I asked them what the budget was for the design, and they said about 50,000. And I laughed at them, thinking they were joking. It turns out they weren't joking. So
I still remember, one of my first ones. I when I was at Solid Rock, and I'd met this guy, and he went and waved his arms around the place and wanted rock work and fountains and lighting, and he wanted a pathway over a pond to his front door with a circular driveway on a slope. And he got to the end of it. He looked at me. He said, "Look, all right, I know it's going to cost at least $20,000." And I almost fell over because in the back of my head, I'm going, "This is over $200,000." But you always get something like that. But I mean, it's again, and probably back then I wasn't equipped to didn't probably know how to deal with that answer, the $20,000 budget. I'm like, I don't think that's right. But these days, I wouldn't hesitate in saying, what you're after. It's probably $300,000, $400,000. It's just, that's what it's going to cost. Because if you don't do that and you don't set the record straight there, and then you're just going to cause issues for yourself later on, no matter what. Yeah.
Like you said, you don't want to tell them what they want to hear if you know that that's not the case, because you're going to do the design, they'll love the design, then you'll get it quoted, and then it's going to be what you should have told them anyway. Can't be built. They're going to find out eventually.
Yeah, it can't be built. And I don't want to be a designer who designs stuff that can't be built. Look, every now and then you do get projects that will blow out from budget perspective. But again, setting expectations. And I know after having worked in a few other design businesses, know what other designers do, they won't get, or they'll charge if they go through that process of adjusting plans to get the price. But I do like to say to clients, we'll work with them to get the budget down where they need it to be. Not necessarily where they need it to be, but I'll talk to them about how they can modify the design to reduce the budget and not impact the design in the worst possible way. Because, if you leave that up to potentially a client or someone else, they'll just chop stuff out that's really important or focus on the wrong areas. So it's good to be involved in those discussions. I do offer that to my clients because, that's always the question that's in the back of their mind. Am I paying for something that, can't be built? And, is it going to go over my budget? And like, we like to push the boundaries. So it does happen. And we just we like to say to the client, look, well, we can be there. We can talk you through what might be, what need to happen to bring your budget down, but there's only so far you can take it. Some people have a really low expectation. It's getting better. Again, 5 or 10 years ago, if you were to ask people what they thought it might cost to do their backyard, they'd say 20 to 50,000. These days, I think just with the block and people having done a lot more work around the house, they're sort of getting a feel for the cost of construction now. I think there's still a little bit of a undersell on landscape. People expect landscape to be cheaper than building a house, for example, but really with construction costs, they're basically the same. So I think the market is understanding that a little bit more, and they also value landscape design a lot more than they used to too.
Yeah. Yeah, I reckon it blows me away how much things cost when I do a quote. Like it's hard because I look at something and think, geez, that's expensive. But I'm also doing jobs I quoted 12 months ago. Like I've got a pool fence we're putting in, a glass pool fence. I quoted $7,700 to the client. Yeah, and thinking I'd make $1,000 out of it. And then I've got the pool fence guys to quote it, and they've quoted me $10,200. So I'm going to lose $2,500 by putting the pool fence in. Yeah. So things like that make it a lot easier for me to charge more because I'm not actually ripping them off. I'm just charging a fair amount.
No, that's right. And I mean, my line, and I do often get contractors who would quote our projects, calling up and say, look, this is pretty high. They're a bit worried about what the client might say. And I said, look, and again, because I've created a certain expectation with the client already, I'm not too concerned by that. And I just say that it is what it is. If you've priced it what you think it needs to be, you've looked into it, what it's cost, you're making your margin. That's just what it's going to be. And we just have to have that hard conversation with the client. It's just going to be the way it's going to be. So yeah, it's good. It's interesting though to hear you say that, you're even surprised, because I mean, I'm always surprised. Yeah. And I've been doing this for, 12, 15 years or whatever it is. But when if the contractor who the guy is quoting it is still surprised, that tells you something about where prices are at the moment. But things add up too, right? How do you ever predict at the first meeting with a client how much something's going to cost? You have no idea.
Yeah. I did a design, one of those ones you're talking about where it might not get built because I just like that healthy budget of, I think their budget was like 150 or to 200.
Yep, it's good
they
budget.
Ideally wanted the pool included in that, but it's also on a steep block, so there's retaining walls. But my design, I quoted it after I did the design, it was like 290.
Yeah.
So then I did a set. So I sent them that design, not until I'd done the second one, but I did a second design showing how I could pair it back to 200. But to make like a paved area around the pool and the retaining walls, Like you couldn't go much less than unless you just have grass where the paving is.
That's it. You get to a point where the design is really compromised, and the client never wants that. But yeah, it's tricky, and I think you need to think of budgets as being fluid, whereas I think people think that they're fixed, and sometimes they are. Look, sometimes the client has a certain, but I've had it both ways where clients didn't want to spend a certain amount of money, and so they pull everything back. And I've had clients who have happily spent more, and especially when the guys get on site and suddenly there's 4 or 5 other things that get added on as they're there. Oh, can you just fix this fence? And ended up I've had projects be as construction start, they've gone over $50,000-$100,000. So, like I said, it can be fluid. You're never quite sure whether a client, if that's what they say is the budget, is that really the budget? You try to design to that, of course, but it's not always the case that that's all they want to spend. And sometimes as well, if they love what they see, they are happy to go a little bit higher. But also their wish list, wish lists are getting longer and longer. There's always it's a basketball court now, not a tennis court. A basketball court, there's a pool, there's a spa, al fresco area, there's lawn areas, you name it. There's built-in trampolines, like outdoor toilets. They want everything. And that really is what dictates the cost overall. It's not so much materials. Like you can change a paving material on a project. You might save $2,000 or whatever, but no one's ever trying to save $2,000. People are trying to save $20,000, $10,000, and that means pulling stuff out, and that means damaging the wish list usually. So you've got to pull back the wish list or increase the budget.
Yeah. And you mentioned the block before, so you were on that. I think it was I don't know what year. It was the same. We did one the same year,
2019.
And you won the one of the.
The owners, the guys, Tess and Luke won that year.
Yeah,
I think they win. Yeah, it wasn't because of us, but they won.
Courtyard was
good
cool.
on them. Courtyard was good. Look, I can get into my spiel on the block. It's good. The block is interesting, right? Because you tell people you're on the block and their ears prick up, right? So the general population, they love it. You say you're on the block. Oh, wow, you must be really good. You were on the block. And truth is, a builder calls you up in a panic and says, I need a landscape designer. Can you help? And you go, yeah, I'm stupid enough to go and do that. So you go and do it because it might be a little bit of fun, or you think it might give you some promotions. And so in a way it does give you promotion, but it's like anything, it's only if you promote it yourself. Most people, I think, will go into the block thinking that the block is going to give them the promotion, or just going to be seen. We'll wear our team shirts and our logo and stuff, and what a great exposure. But that's not how it works. You'll be lucky if you get that kind of exposure. And there have been guys on the block. I think there was a guy who did a timber bath one year. He worked down on the coast, and he went from bloody getting 5 orders of these timber baths per year to getting 500 because of the block. So that might have given him a breakdown, but that it happens rarely. And if you're on the block regularly, like Matt Menicelli, who's a builder there, who we work with quite a lot, great. He gets lots of exposure. He's very good on TV. But if you just walk in there and you think that just being on the block is going to give you that promotion, you're kidding yourself. You've got to promote it yourself. It's like doing the Melbourne Flower and Garden Show. It's the same thing. You can turn up, but it's what you do afterwards with the photos, with your PR, and how you go about telling people that you were on the block. Because that's when people start to, like I said, their ears prick up then, and then you get that sort of that prestige, I guess. But there's nothing prestigious about the block. Actually, being on it is 1,000 trades. You're in the middle of them. You're trying to, you've got so many. As a designer, design really is all about control and designing something and getting it built in that way without so many external influences impacting what you're doing. The block is all about external influences. You don't control the budget. You don't necessarily control the brief. You don't control the environment. You don't control the time it gets built. There's so many things going on in there, and it's really hell on earth. I think it's really difficult. And like I said, it gives you a bit, but at the end of the day, I don't know whether it's worth it. I don't think it is. Is just because it soaks up so much of your time in that period, and not just a little bit, but like whole weeks can disappear on the block. And like I said, the promotion it's good to say you've been on the block, but I could, if you think of all the time and money that you spend on that, you could probably spend that on marketing and get the same effect. I don't know.
Oh, yeah, a whole lot more probably.
Yeah, probably. And it'd be less stress. It's kind of one of those things. It's kind of good to do. We've did it twice now, but that was the main one recently. And I don't think it's good. It's good fun to do. Like it's one of those things you like to tick off. But I got asked again last year, and I said no. And I had too much work on anyway. But it was all, what is it, out near Gisborne,
Macedon,
big,
I think. Oh yeah.
and had big spaces, and like, oh my god, I know what the budgets are like for a bloody for a little courtyard. Imagine trying to spread that across an acre. Are you kidding? Can't even do that regularly with a big budget.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, how did you find the experience? Did you?
Yeah, I loved it because I love pushing myself to the limit and competitive. I'm very competitive on things as well, so I like that kind of thing. But it's not a wise business decision going on there.
No, it's not.
But yeah, same deal. Look, we got asked to go on the last 2 years. So we were on the previous two. Got asked to go on the last two. I said no both times. But I'm trying to push my design side of the things more. So I thought that could be a good opportunity to do it. But then I realized that they've got low budgets. So it's actually the worst opportunity to do it, because you can't do a good design with a low budget.
No, you cannot. And you spend so much time, well, I certainly did anyways, is pulling a lot of strings to get things for a good price or wholesale prices and things like that as well. I mean, look, Dan, that's one of the good things about it is you make all these connections with people around you on site, but also those suppliers and things as well. I like that as a designer, to be able to go and talk to those suppliers and get that relationship going as well. But it's a massive commitment. Like I said, it's great to do the sort of thing. It's great to do once, and it is fun and competitive. At the end of the day, you don't necessarily get to control whether you win or lose. It's not like the Melbourne Flower and Garden Show where you can design whatever you want, provided you can make it happen.
Yeah.
That's a lot more flexible. So that's a lot more, like you say, from a design perspective, you get a better outcome and you get better photos, whereas you don't have that control over the block, unfortunately. But you do it, have the fun, and maybe move on. There's only so many times you can beat your head against the wall before you realize it's a bad idea.
Yeah. You do like doing those things that don't necessarily make you any money straight away. You've done the Pool and Spa show as well. Yeah, the major feature there.
I've done it all. I was just in a Shayna Blaze TV show too, just before Christmas. So I'm a little bit of a I was going to say a bad word then, but I do, sell myself out to try and get for marketing, right? I love marketing, And like you kind of go, it's my business. I want to get it rolling. I want to be involved in things. I want a story to tell on social media. So you go and do these things with these expectations. I have learned to lower my expectations because very rarely do they meet them, but and some things do, and it's trial and error. You don't know. There's no bloody playbook to read to find out what the best marketing is for your business. So you go and try these things out. Some of them work really well. I usually find rule of thumb is anything to do with TV is not as good. The expectation is always high, but the delivery is not necessarily that much. So I've done a lot of things, like you say, the Spasa Pool show. At some point, it was the HIA Pool, the home show, MIFGS, Melbourne International Flower and Garden Show. A couple of TV shows now as well. So we've done all of that stuff. I still think managing your own marketing is more valuable than any of those things. But for everybody who wants to listen, the best outcomes from marketing and from a direct sort of, I guess, the convert directly to business was Spasa.
Yeah, right.
I'm not saying that just because I do talk at Spasa. That Spasa Pool show, again, you compare it to something like the garden show, where we built a show garden at the garden show. We built a show garden at Spasa. You get very few leads. You might get 2 or 3 leads from MIFGS because it's a different market. It's an older market. They're not necessarily there because they want to buy a pool or a landscape. They're there to buy a nice trinket or a little plant or see some pretty gardens and then go home. And that's great. It's what it's about. It's 100,000 people who aren't your client. Whereas if you go to Spasa, they're the people who walk through that door. They're there to buy a pool. And not all of them, I always said, not all of there's about 10% of the people who walk through the Spasa doors are my clients. 5% of them don't know that they want to be a client of mine because they're not really thinking about design. But if I talk to them, I'll have the opportunity to explain why it's valuable, and they'll understand and they'll value what we do. But then the other 5% are there because they want a pool and they want a designer. And if you look the best when you're there, the best clients will come to you. And that was always our theory, and it always worked. So we'd come out of there with a lot of names and numbers, and it would convert into a lot of work. So it was really good a few years ago when we were doing it. We got a lot of direct work out of it, but you've got to put the work in to get the right clients out. So, you know, you got to think about that stuff when you do it. You got to think about everything before you do it when it comes to marketing. But that worked well for us. MIFGS doesn't necessarily do that. We're about to do it again this year. We were supposed to do it in 2020, but COVID shut us down. So we're back this year. I shouldn't really even be talking to you at the moment. I should be working on that, but yeah.
So who's building yours this year?
TLC. Oh, actually, sorry, no, ACM Outdoors. We work a lot with ACM. I love Chris and Alden. They're great guys, and they've got a great team. Young group of guys. You know, they always say landscape construction is a young person's game, and I can see why. They're younger, fitter, stronger, and they've got the desire, you know, to deliver a good project as well. And we've worked with them a lot over the last 5 or 6 years. It's been a good relationship. We love sending clients to them because they're excellent communicators, good tradespeople, but communication, man. That's if we can refer contractors who are good communicators. Josh Norman's another one we use, and he's an excellent communicator. We just want to send someone who gets along well with the client and respects the client and can deliver for a client as well. And yeah, it's not much, but it's a big thing. It's a massive thing being a good communicator.
Absolutely, that's the most important thing is communication with the client. So
it is,
and that's a hard thing for someone who's just designed like your business. Is you've got to recommend, because the clients want you to recommend someone who's going to build it. So you want to be able to recommend someone who's going to, you know, live up to your recommendation well.
Yeah. Well, we want someone who obviously can build, has a good quality finish, but they need to, we're effectively saying to the client when we pass their name on to that client is these are guys who are good and they can do what you need them to do. And, you know, as contractors, you guys are going to have a lot of hard conversations with clients. You know, in a way, we've kind of got it easy. We do have hard conversations, but shit goes wrong all the time on site. You know, you find stuff that shouldn't be there or things you've got to put in variations and ask for more money. You know, you've got to have hard conversations all the time. And the good communicators are the ones that make that easy. Not easy, but make those hard conversations. They don't turn into arguments or fights or issues. You know, good communicators get onto it early, explain to the client what's going on. Again, set expectations properly at the start. And that process becomes a lot easier. Whereas the bad communicators don't talk to the client. And the problem gets worse and worse and worse until it gets to a point where everyone's annoyed and then nothing gets done well or everyone's a bit. Once you get that flicker of annoyance that just sticks there, that will come through to everything, and everything after that will be hard.
Yep. Yeah, it's like when if there's a chipped paver, you're better off replacing it as soon as possible, because if the client sees one thing that's wrong, I'll go looking for more things. So it's the same if there's a disagreement, they'll lose their trust in you, and then you can't get that back.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's been a couple of times I've dealt with suppliers and they just haven't got onto the problem quick enough, and it's festered. And so the client is already angry by the time the supplier might come on site, paving supplier might come on site and see it. And then there's already tension. And so everything that's said, their expectation is that they're not a good person or their product's not good or whatever. Whereas if there's a problem, recognize the problem and deal with it quickly, and then the client will be okay, cool. They'll be more amenable to fixing the problem the right way. But you know, again, you live and learn these things, right? Like stuff like that, you just it takes time to get experience.
And like I recommend people, like when we're too far booked out, I'll recommend someone else to do the construction if we can't do it. Yep. And if I recommend someone and then they burn the client for whatever reason, there's no second chances. I don't recommend them ever again, because that's the same deal. Because I could say, no, I don't know anyone, but I've recommended someone, and if they let you down, then I'm not going to recommend them again.
No. And I've had that a few times. You're absolutely right then. It's because you build up all this momentum with the client as well, and goodwill, you know, like there's this whole bunch of goodwill that comes with the end of a project, the end of the design project. And you need that to keep going. You need that to keep going. And yeah, if you lose that trust, if they lose the trust in the contractor, they lose trust in you as well. So yeah, good contractor is great. That's why we like to have solid relationships and not spread our designs out to too many different contractors, but like to work with people who we enjoy working with as well. And we've all got room for another contractor, I think, because there's so much work out there at the moment. But like I said, finding and building that relationship can take time. It's never just, hey, let's get together and work together. You've got to find out whether you do a few projects together and get a feel for the way you work and whether they're going to communicate with me as well. Because I love it when someone picks up the phone and say, hey, we've got to change something because this has happened on site. What's the best way to deal with it, rather than just jumping in there, dealing with it in either the quickest or the easiest way, and that compromises the design. Because when people come to us, they value design, they value it looking good. So it's good to make those decisions based on design as they come up too. If things need to be fixed, is get the designer involved. And I think sometimes contractors are a bit scared to get the designer involved because that means spending more money or takes longer or whatever. It just makes the process harder. But I think at the end of the day, if you value getting the right outcome for the client, it's a better way to do it, is to get the client and the designer involved, or the designer involved, and then have that conversation with the client. It's always good.
Yeah, something I do and I tell my guys to do all the time as well is, like, if I'm going to contact a designer or if they're going to contact me with a problem, is to have a solution as well. So like if I was working on one of your projects and something didn't work out, I'd ring you up and say, this doesn't work out. Do you want to do this? Because I'm on site, so it's easier for me to work out a solution possibly.
Yes.
So at least it'll give you a way you can say, oh yeah, that'll work, or no, we won't do it that way because of this. So you don't want to just say, I've got a problem, what should I do? You want to think about it.
Absolutely. Having, and that's, again, it comes back that an experienced contractor is always good like that, and say, look, that doesn't work. What you drew doesn't work for whatever reason. Here's an answer. And some guys like to point fingers if something goes wrong. It's his fault or it's his fault and whatever like that. But I hate that crap. Just let's all work together to find a solution. Doesn't matter whose fault it is. We've got a problem. Let's work through it. And again, ACM, your Josh Normans of the world are all very good at that sort of stuff. And yes, presenting a solution to a problem or multiple solutions is always good. It's always good.
There's no point blaming anyone for problems, because I went to a Catholic high school, but I'm not a big believer in the Bible, but I did like some of the phrases they have in there.
Yeah.
And one of the ones, let he who's without sin cast the first stone, is a good one. So
yes.
Whoever, it's not like if you're perfect, maybe then you can judge other people for making mistakes. But if you're not perfect, you can't judge someone else.
We all make mistakes.
Exactly.
So sometimes it's the contractor, sometimes it's the designer, sometimes the client, sometimes it's the site. And like I said, it's about, and I think sometimes, because the clients, depending on how the project's going, the clients can be looking for someone, I guess, to blame. But like, as long as the contractor and the designer are working together and just say, look, we'll work something through, and there's always a solution. Not always the best one, mind you, but there is always a solution. As long as you can work together and get that outcome, I think the clients are usually pretty happy with that too.
Yeah. So what's coming up next, the next 5 years or long term for?
Good question. Look, consolidating our design business, and by that I mean, I guess we've kind of grown like a lot of businesses have, but it's been a tough 2 years. It's been a really busy 2 years, which is, everyone always says, oh, it's better than being quiet, and it is. But growing is not so easy either. Growing pains are difficult. You've got to establish a team around you who can, you don't. At first, you kind of want another all-rounder. You want another one of you to jump in and do everything you do, but when you get to a certain size, you actually need to get specialists and people doing, certain things. So I need someone who does the admin well and also checks planning permits and does all the planning permits, and someone who just specifically does design, someone who specifically does 3D documentation and drawings and things. I've got a marketing person, starting to think about what roles can I take off my own shoulders and get a specialist in to do, because you get a specialist in to do something like, for instance, marketing. I've got a wonderful marketing manager now, Dana. She's amazing. She does all the marketing far better than I ever would. And it's just, it's good to say, hey, Dana, can you take care of that? And she does it, and it's better than I could do it. And that's gold. That is amazing. And that's the same with everywhere in your business. And it can take time, because like I said, there's not those people necessarily coming through the educational facilities. Like there's no digital design course that people can do and and come out of that and go, yeah, I'm ready to do digital design. I can work on AutoCAD, SketchUp, and whatever Lumion, whatever rendering program you're working. You have to teach them that, and it takes a long time. It takes a long time. So I've got my team to a point now where they're getting really good at those different roles, and we've got good people in good roles, and we're still growing a little bit. So like I said, I want to put on a senior designer. So I want to consolidate the business and get everyone set up in roles. And then if one person leaves, great, that's okay. We can fill that role rather than say everyone turning over. That would be the worst thing. But consolidating the business so we're comfortable with what we're doing. We've got the projects we want or we like to work on, and we're working on those. And then maybe think about doing a maintenance business or growing the business in some other way.
Yep. And something I forgot to mention before when you were talking about how the design course should be at least 3 years was especially like with your designs being mostly around pools is the amount of regulations in terms of what the pool fence boundary. It blows people away when I'm saying, oh, you can't do this because of X, Y, Z, and you can't do that because it's got to have 900 million there. And the amount, there's an insane amount. So it's hard to design because you need to do the design properly before it can get quoted.
Yeah, absolutely. This is why you need a bit of that experience. You need to understand pool compliance now. And you're kidding yourself if you're designing pools and you don't know the pool regulations because they're hard work, and people aren't coming to us with a rectangular pool with a pool fence around it. It's a small space there. It's on a hill, and there's all sorts of challenges with pool fence, and they want to make it invisible. They don't necessarily want glass anymore because it's hard to clean. There's 1,000 things to think about, and it's always a half-hour conversation, like you say, of explaining to the client what if they're going to pull the pool out of the ground, for example. What does that mean to your fences? Well, they've got to be 1.8 meters high. So if you're going for that pool 1.2 meters out of the ground, and your fences then need to be 1.8 meters above that, so it's 3 meters high. So what does it mean to do a 3 meter high fence? Well, you've got to get report and consent. You've got to get a neighbour's approval and council approval, and none of it's guaranteed, so we can't actually tell you whether it's possible or not sometimes. But sites are getting harder, sites are getting smaller. You need to know all your regs, and like I said, as you say, it impacts design. So you have to take the time out to explain that to people. And you're right, it does blow them away with how complex it is. I guess the benefit to that is that people, when they start thinking about a pool and say they always contact a pool builder first, and they get a pool builder out, and the pool builder says, oh, well, you've got a pool fence here, but that's going to be hard. They start to realize how difficult it is, and that maybe they need a designer to think through that, especially if they want it done well. So it does, I guess, bring work in a way as well, but it's also the bane of my life. It's trying to design pool fences. Just about there's no simple pool fence anymore. It's it's either got to be steel palisade fencing, or there's a level change somewhere, and you're trying to hide it, and you're trying to work within the regs, but also kind of not bend them, but work around them as best you can, and then I'll add to that is that building surveyors there's a certain, 90% of the building regs are pretty set in stone and are not grey. They're very black and white, but then there's a lot of 5 or 10% that's a little bit grey. And so, again, trying to explain to a client what you can and can't do with plant material around a boundary fence in the pool area is kind of grey. Like, we don't know the answer. And, in a couple of years, when they start checking all these pools, every pool in Melbourne has a hedge next to it. And what are they going to do? We don't know. Are they going to say that they're all climbable? They're going to chop them down? I don't know.
They measure which branches are 10 mil.
10 mil. They're going to go, no, and they're not going to, I've already had one guy say, I'm not going to measure plant branches. It's not going to happen. Yeah. But then there's a little clause in the regs that say if you've got a well-formed like hedge or something with good coverage, then maybe that's okay. And so we get some things passed, but not others. If it's considered a tree, it's not going to get passed. But if it's considered a hedge or a shrub, then it's okay. Like I say, you've got to have that conversation so that that's not a surprise to the client if it comes up later on, because you can't necessarily give them a straight answer there and then, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's wild. Like we had a design we were building, and it had a square mesh, some mesh reo on the fence, so 100 mil mesh, or it might be 50 mil by 50 mil, and it was 5 mil thick. So we had to make sure that the horizontal ones were at the back against the fence, against the cement sheet, because if it was around the other way, then it's a 10 mil lip that they could climb on, because there's a 5 mil gap and then the 5 mil of the steel.
Oh man.
Like there's just,
it's just,
it's crazy.
It is crazy. It is crazy. I've considered myself someone who's pretty switched on with those regs. But even now, I still find out things that I didn't know before. There's something about a bloody cyclone fence next to fences as well. You can do that, but I would, logic tells you, or common sense tells you that's climbable. But for some reason in the regs, you're allowed to do this cyclone fence within a certain proximity of the. But and again, you think a really well-formed hedge is actually a great barrier for pools, but it's just certain things about those aren't allowed in the regs, and everyone wants to keep kids safe. So I guess you can understand why they put the regs in place. So just they had a chance, I think, a few years ago to sort of amend the regs a little bit, and I thought hopefully would bring a little bit of common sense into some of those areas, like plant material on the boundary, but don't think that happened.
I heard Chris Smartis from Spasa on, or it might be the Master Pool Builders Association, they call themselves now. He was on the Landscape Victoria podcast. I think he was saying that they're going to be bringing out some more amendments this year. They're just going to work them out first.
Yes.
But yes, talking about the cyclone fence, I saw a guy who did a fence at a breeze blocks. So it's an internal fence, but it was it was a pool barrier. And because it was 1.8 meters, it's fine. So they can be climbable with their 1.8 meters. But if it's within 900 mil of the boundary fence, that bit can't be climbable.
Yes.
But
okay.
The rest of it can be. So,
I don't get it. I don't get it sometimes. I really don't understand. And we've been told that you can't grow. Again, it depends on the building survey. You can't grow climbers on the boundary fence if you're using it as a pool fence on the internal face, because it becomes, some of it they consider it climbable, but then it depends on the guy surveyor, and the building surveyors aren't plant guys. They're not going to know exactly how that thing is going to grow in the future. But we've basically stopped putting climbers inside the pool area now. And if you've got limited space and you want to get some greenery in, there's nothing better than a climber that sits against the fence. But so it does get harder, and it does push the cost usually of landscaping up, just because we've got to treat those fences in some other way. We can't just cover them with say a climber, which is the cheap, that's a $12 plant in the ground, covers your fence nice and green. Now you've got to do like timber battens or something, which is going to cost $5,000, $10,000 depending on how long the fence is. So it does push the price up. But pool compliance it's a good thing to mention, because it is one of the toughest things that we deal with, and it's every project, because we do a lot of pools.
Yeah. And the same with saying that the surveyor's not a horticulturalist. Like, you could put a ficus pumila on a boundary fence, and if you keep it trimmed, it's fine. It's fine. If you let it grow, then it's going to come out and create big branches that'll be climbable. So
exactly.
How it's maintained.
Comes out over time. And I guess that probably helps that they're coming back to inspect these things over time. So maybe they can pick that stuff up. But, it's always Boston ivy. We're always trying to use Boston ivy on fences, lovely flat plant that doesn't take up a lot of space. Ficus pumila grows off as it gets more mature, unless you trim it back. But Boston ivy is quite good, and we have had in the past people knock us back for that. And I've also had the same situation with a pool fence, identical situation on two different projects. One surveyor permitted it, one surveyor didn't. And it's like, how do I design to this? How do I know what to design if I've got two different answers? It's just interpretation of the rules.
And the last question for you is, who do you think would be a good guest to have on the podcast?
I've got to put forward Scott Wynd from TLC Pools. I know Scott really well. He's been part of my my life since I moved on from Ian Barker and Associates, and he's been amazing. He's a very good guy, lots of experience. He was back in. He's always from the northeast of town, Melbourne. So he grew up around the Gordon Ford stuff. I think he might have done some rock placement around a Gordon Ford pools and things out in the Eltham days. So he's come up through the ranks. He's always been in landscape. And I know a lot of your guys have talked about how many teams you run, like, do you have one team or three teams? And he went through that process of he went up to 3 teams, then went back to 1, then he dropped off landscaping and just focused on pools. And now he's kind of getting back into the landscape a little bit too. So he'd be a really interesting guy, I reckon, to talk to. Been to the Chelsea Flower Show 8 times or something stupid like that. He's the guy I'd recommend to chat to.
Awesome. If he doesn't get back to me, I'll get you to course it. Yeah.
He will. He's got the same marketing person as I have. He's desperate.
Well, Darin, can't thank you enough for coming on. Love this chat. And I know that a lot of people get a lot of value out of it. So thanks so much.
I hope so, mate. Thank you, Joel. I much appreciate the time. And good luck with your business and everything as well. And hopefully we catch up out on site Sunday.
I'll see you at MIFGS this year.
Yeah, come and say good day. We'll talk soon.